Question number 4, Eugenie Sage.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker, thank you.
Tēnā koe.
My question is to the Minister for Primary Industries. Does he stand by his predecessor's statement that protecting our aquatic environment by setting environmental standards and fostering good fishing practices results in sustainable fisheries?
The Honourable
Mr.
Nathan
Speaker,
Guy.
yes, I do. I believe the fundamental principles of the QMS are sound. This is evidenced by the fact that 96% of fish stocks of known value are at or above sustainable levels. However, the Heron report released last Friday clearly shows that MPI's decision not to prosecute in the case of Achilles was flawed. This was disappointing and should never have happened. The Heron report notes that MPI's processes are generally robust and its people experienced and professional, and I will ensure that MPI make whatever changes are necessary to ensure improvements are made.
Parliamentary.
Order. 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 I don't mind. Order. I don't mind some interjection, but the level coming from one member to my left is now too regular. Supplementary question, Eugenie Sage.
Is fish dumping a good practice that results in sustainable fisheries? And if not, why have he and his ministry failed to outlaw it?
The Honourable
Mr. Speaker, no, that is not a good practice. And countries around the world have been dealing and grappling with this issue, and it's mentioned in the Heron report, right back from MFish through to MPI. We have the operational review, the future of fisheries, underway. We've had one round of public consultation. We'll be moving to the next round. And I'm sure there will need to be policy changes and regulatory changes that are made, and the member may also be aware that I've asked my officials to crack on with electronic monitoring, which is going to be very important with extra compliance.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Eugenie Sage.
Does the Minister disagree with the statement by the Director of Fisheries Management that, and I quote, discarding is a systemic failure of the current system and something we have not been able to get on top of from day one of the QMS?
The Honourable Nathan Guy.
Mr. Speaker, if the member was listening, I addressed that question when I answered it previously. Dumping and discarding is an issue that successive governments have been trying to deal with and grapple with over a period of time. The QMS is now 30 years old. We have the operational review underway, and I'm sure through that process the necessary changes will be made.
Supplementary question, Eugenie Sage.
Is his current review, his operational review, still just a pulse check and a high-level review, as he has described it, or will it address the big and long-standing systemic problems like fish dumping?
The Honourable Nathan Guy.
Mr. Speaker, the operational review, Future of Fisheries, is underway. We've had our first round of consultation. We're aiming to have a public discussion document out by the end of the year. This is a very broad review. We will need to deal with the fundamentals of policy and regulatory changes, and I'm of the view that I will need to come into the House to ensure that the electronic monitoring, GPS, electronic monitoring and cameras on vessels will need a law change. But in saying that, Mr. Speaker, we've learnt from the Achilles report the Snapper 1 cameras on board those vessels now. We have a legally binding MOU, so all that footage can be used for prosecution purposes.
Supplementary question, Eugenie Sage.
How can the public have any confidence that cameras and video monitoring will help when MPI had extensive video footage of fish dumping in Operation Achilles and senior managers blocked prosecution based on that video footage?
Order. The Honourable Nathan Guy.
Mr. Speaker, as QC Heron states, MPI's prosecution processes are generally robust with high quality and experienced people. However, a flawed process was followed. It wasn't well documented. That led MPI to decide not to prosecute in the case of Achilles, and I find that very disappointing.
Supplementary question, Eugenie Sage.
Does the Minister still think the quota management system is world-leading when fish dumping means the Ministry has inaccurate information about fish stocks and catch limits?
The Honourable Nathan Guy.
Well, Mr Speaker, I answered that in the primary answer where I said it's evidenced by the fact that 96% of our fish stocks of known value are at or above sustainable levels. We do a huge amount of science, and all of the plenary scientific information is publicly available, and the member should well be aware that twice a year for the 1st of April and 1st of October fishing seasons, there's a huge amount of scientific evidence that is made available, that is consulted on, that ultimately the Minister decides to ensure that our fishing system is sustainable for everyone to enjoy in the long term.
Supplementary question, Eugenie Sage.
Rather than his pulse check review, will the Minister now commission an independent review of the operation of the quota management system, given the Simmons report, which showed that commercial fishers were dumping more than twice the amount of fish they caught between 1986 and 2010, and now we have the Heron report, which shows that MPI fails to prosecute such dumping?
The Honourable Nathan Guy.
Mr Speaker, what's really interesting, and part of that question to do with the Simmons report, is MPI is trying to get hold of all of the data sets to analyse that information, and because that report is so politically charged, they've been unable to get their hands on all of that information, and I find that very disappointing. Instead of that report and those authors choosing to work constructively with MPI and share the information so that we can ensure the sustainability of our long-term fisheries here in New Zealand, that information has unfortunately been blocked.
Order. Question
Mr. Speaker.
number 5.